converts it into a voucher-type program that will leave seniors paying out of pocket for many life-saving health care costs. In other words, if you end up at the age of 75 with cancer or another illness, what the Republican proposal does is give a voucher to a private insurance company, $6,000, $8,000, we're not exactly sure. After that, good luck, you're on your own. You have an income of $15,000, you have cancer, how are you going to pay for that? The Republicans say there will be a voucher ending Medicare as we know it right now. The Republican proposal would force seniors to pay $3,500 more for prescription drugs. The proposal would reopen the prescription drug donut hole, requiring that seniors pay full price for prescription drugs. Madam President, at a time when so many of our people have no health insurance, the Republican budget contains $1.4 trillion in Medicaid cuts over 10 years by turning it into a block grant program. We are now reading in various states who have budget problems that their solution to the budget problems is simply to throw people off of Medicaid, including children. Well, what happens if you have no health insurance and you get sick? Madam President, we are beginning to talk about death panels. That's what we're talking about. If you are sick, you have no health insurance, what do you do? I guess you have options. You die, you get sicker, you suffer in ways that you did not have to suffer. The Republican proposal, as outlined by Congressman Ryan yesterday, also includes over $1.6 trillion in cuts over the next decade for education, Pell Grants, infrastructure, affordable housing, food stamps, food safety, and other vital programs for the middle class, the elderly, the sick, and the children. Madam President, what is also interesting, it is literally beyond belief to me, is that while the Republicans are slashing programs for low and middle income people, what they are also doing, I think people will think I'm not serious, but I am, at the same time as the rich are getting richer and they're slashing programs for low and moderate income people, the Republican budget plan would significantly lower taxes for millionaires and billionaires. So we cut Head Start, we cut Pell Grants, we cut community health centers, but at the same time, we give huge tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. Furthermore, the Republican proposal would also lower taxes for the largest corporations in this country. So, Madam President, my point here is we all do understand that this country has a serious deficit problem and a $14 trillion national debt. And I think every member of this Senate is concerned about the issue and wants to address it. The question is, do we move toward a balanced budget on the backs of the weakest, most vulnerable people in our country, on the backs of the poor, the children, the elderly, the disabled? That's one way you can do it. Or do you ask for shared sacrifice? Do you say to the wealthiest people in this country, do you say to the largest corporations in this country, you know, you're part of America too, and you've got to help us get out of this deficit crisis? Madam President, last week I issued a list of 10 major corporations, 10 major corporations who paid nothing in taxes in recent years, and in some cases actually got a rebate from the federal government after making huge profits. So to my mind, instead of cutting back on Head Start and Pell Grants and community health centers, which will have a devastating impact on low and moderate income Americans, maybe we might want to ask General Electric, which made $26 billion in profits over the last 5 years and received a $4.1 billion refund from the IRS, maybe we might want to ask them to pay something in taxes. I think it's a bit absurd that the average middle-class person pays more in income tax, federal income tax, than does General Electric. Maybe we want to change that. Maybe we want to ask Chevron, who made $10 billion in profits in 2009, who got a $19 million refund from the IRS, maybe they want to pay something in taxes so that we can move to a deficit reduction in a way that is fair. So here's the bottom line. The bottom line is corporate profits are at an all-time high. Richest people in this country are doing phenomenally well. Middle class is in decline. Poverty is increasing. Republican answer, more tax breaks for the very, very rich, lower corporate taxes, but stick it to working families in a horrendous way, which will cause massive pain. We are in a fork road in terms of public policy. Do we develop public policy here which protects all of our people, which expands the middle class? Or are we at a moment in history which moves this country aggressively toward oligarchy, in which you have a small number of people at the top with incredible wealth and incredible power, while the middle class continues to disappear? Now is the time, in my view, for working families all over this country to stand up and say, enough is enough. We need shared sacrifice as we go forward. We do not need to see the middle class in this country further disappear. Madam President, with that, I would yield the floor.
Senator from Montana.
Madam President, I have 11 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority leaders, and I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise today to offer an amendment to exempt farmers and ranchers and small businesses from EPA regulation of greenhouse gases. The science is clear. Greenhouse gas pollution is causing climate change. Climate change is here. It's real. It's human-caused. And it will hurt our economy and the health of our kids and our grandkids. In Montana, we're already seeing the effect. According to Dr. Steve Running at the University of Montana, the duration of the wildfire season in the western United States has increased by 78 days since the 1970s. This trend is driven by earlier snowpack melt and less summer precipitation due to climate change. And this trend costs jobs in Montana's tourism and timber industry. Climate change also endangers our national security. According to a report recently authored by retired Navy Admiral Frank Bowman, even the most moderate predicted trends in climate change will present new national security challenges, end quote. And that is why the Pentagon included climate change among the security threats identified in its quadrennial defense review. I believe that we all of us, have a moral responsibility when we leave this place to leave it in as good a shape or better shape to our kids and our grandkids. Better than we found it. That means we ought to deal with climate change by reducing our emissions of greenhouse gas pollution. But we must also do so in a manner that doesn't hurt the economy. Madam President, small businesses and agriculture are the drivers of economic recovery and job creation. Of the 200,000 jobs added in March, over half were created by businesses with 50 or fewer employees. And over 90% of the 200,000 jobs created last month were created by businesses with 500 or fewer employees. My amendment ensures that these businesses can continue to add jobs. My amendment is very simple. It exempts farmers and ranchers and small businesses from EPA's greenhouse gas pollution regulations. Under my amendment, only about 15,000 of the more than 6 million stationary sources that emit greenhouse gases in this country would be regulated by the EPA. These 15,000 sources are large plants run by big corporations. And over 96% of these 15,000 sources already have to get permits under the Clean Air Act for emissions of criteria pollutants. Moreover, these 15,000 polluters account for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions from stationary sources in the country. So under the Baucus Amendment, small businesses would be protected, while the biggest polluters that account for the vast majority of emissions would have to comply with the law. EPA is going forward with regulations to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. We ought to ensure these regulations preserve our outdoor heritage, protect our children's health, promote our national security, and protect small businesses, farmers, and ranchers. My amendment does just that, and I urge my colleagues to support it. And, Madam President, I suggest the opposite quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'd like to speak as if in morning business for 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we find ourselves in dangerous territory. While Republicans and Democrats continue to point fingers and hold fiery press conferences, a government shutdown is quickly approaching. The blame game is like quicksand. It has the ability to drag down not just the Senate and the House, but our entire economy and even our country. No matter how you look at it, a shutdown would be reckless and irresponsible. We can get this short-term budget problem resolved if all parties would turn off the rhetoric and stop the campaigning. A few extreme partisans stand in the way of progress, blocking a good faith effort of many others seeking common ground. I ask them to take to heart what it says in the book of Isaiah. Come now, let us reason together. We need to overcome this budget impasse and live up to the oath we took and to the people that we represent. Larger challenges await our attention. It's not in our best interest to see the government shut down, and I don't think it's in the best interest of the nation to continue on this deficit spending cycle that we've been on. We owe it to the American people, and the world is watching us to show American leadership on both our short-term and long-term fiscal challenges. I'd like to see us turn our efforts to the blueprint provided by the Debt Commission. I commend the bipartisan group of senators who have begun to turn parts of this plan into legislation. We must find ways to reduce spending, address entitlement programs, and reform the tax code. And now, with all the momentum and opportunity built up over the last few months, it's the time to lead. We must make the serious decisions to get our nation out of the red so that we can be competitive in the future. Again, I'd say let's turn off the rhetoric and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. You know, in Washington, the blame game has become par for the course. It's become just politics as usual. In fact, it's one thing that people in my state are sick and tired of, and one of the reasons why they've lost confidence in the Congress and in our government. And besides that, how in the world does holding press conferences and pointing fingers at others, how in the world does that help resolve anything? Besides that, it's just not true. Because the truth of the matter is that we are in this fiscal situation that we're in today because of decisions that all of us have made over the last decades. In fact, I saw yesterday, or I guess it was yesterday in the paper, where Speaker Boehner was talking to some of his caucus, and he talked about get ready for the shutdown, and there were ovations over there. Well, let me say this. There are no ovations over here for a government shutdown. We do not want to see it, and I'm not just talking about the Democrats in the Senate. I don't know of any Republicans in the Senate who want to see a shutdown. In fact, from my standpoint, one of the tests I use when I look at politicians is the louder they are and the more often they have press conferences to blame other people, that probably means the more they are to blame for the problems that we have today. And I certainly hope that as the elections roll around next year, the American people will remember many of the politicians' attempts here in Washington to avoid responsibility for this terrible fiscal crisis that we're in. One thing we need to keep in mind is that what we're talking about this week in terms of shutting down the government, I hope that doesn't happen, but what we're talking about this week is really only important for the next 6 months. We're only talking about for the rest of this fiscal year. The real battle, the more meaningful discussion and debate and fight even that we need to have is over the long-term fiscal policies of this country. So for the next 6 months, I don't want to say that's not important because it is, but I would say it's a time for us to demonstrate to the American people, to the markets, and to the world that we can come up with political solutions to very challenging problems that we have. I'm also very concerned in this fragile economy that if we do shut down the government, that might be something that would shake this economy and actually possibly stop it in its tracks. I hope not reverse it, but I do have the concern about an abrupt cutoff of government spending, what that might do to the economy. You know, our fiscal challenges that the Debt Commission has focused on and many of us have focused on, they're beyond politics. They're bigger than politics. They're more important than the next election. In fact, they're more important than our own personal political fortunes. This fiscal situation that we're in is not about the next election, but it's about the next generation. In fact, if you look back at the time that we call the Battle of Britain, one of the things Winston Churchill said that always stuck with me, he said, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." And he was talking about those brave men who flew those airplanes over Great Britain to protect the skies and protect the British people and really to win the war, to stop Nazi Germany from invading and defeating the English Empire, the British Empire. The so few that we have today can be named, and their names are Tom Coburn, Dick Durbin, Mark Warner, Saxby Chambliss, Mike Crapo, and Kent Conrad. Those few have been meeting for weeks, even months, to try to come up with a comprehensive budget agreement based on the blueprint that the Debt Commission has given us. I would say that these 6 senators, they're not politicians. They're statesmen. They're trying to do what's right for the country. They're trying to do what's in the country's best interest, not their own best interest. I can guarantee you each one of the 6 will face tremendous criticism from their own parties and from other quarters about what they're trying to do. To me, that's courage. To me, that's leadership. To me, that's what being a senator is all about. And I know that right now there's 6 of them meeting, and I know at some point, once they come out and once they're ready to announce what they want to do, many others will join that effort. But I think that we need to cheer them on and encourage them to finish this very hard task that they've begun. I'm reminded when I think about those 6 sitting here in the Capitol and in various rooms around the Capitol, I'm reminded of that phrase in the Declaration of Independence right before our Founding Fathers signed that great document where they say, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Well, this is our time to put it all on the line. We need to put our political lives on the line, our political fortunes on the line, and our honor. And we need to honor the commitment we've made to this country when all 100 of us stood up, in fact, all 535 of us stood up and took the oath of office that we were going to do what was right for this country. You know, I'm also reminded of I mentioned the book of Isaiah in my statement a few moments ago. I'm reminded of many times in the Old Testament, whether it be in the prophets or in the Proverbs or wherever it may be, we are always encouraged to do right, to do justice, to show mercy. We want to really be upright and true, and I think that's what they call us to do and what they want us to do. I'm also reminded in the New Testament, when Jesus is talking to the political and religious leadership of his day, he says, "Are you so blind?" And are we so blind that we can't see the forest for the trees here, that we can't understand how important it is for this country to get our debt and deficit where it needs to be? Are we so blind to not be able to see that we need to put everything on the table, that this is a time for great leadership and shared sacrifice, and we all have to give up something to get this done? You know, it's our time to lead. This may be the greatest challenge of our generation, of any of us who are in this chamber who's serving either in the House or Senate right now. This may be our one moment in history for greatness. And I sincerely hope that we rise to the challenge because I believe the future of the Republic depends on it. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Thank you. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The pending business on the Senate floor is continued debate on the Small Business Research Bill. David Hawkins, in his CQ Daily Briefing, writes that the Senate will vote at 4 p.m. on 7 amendments which have nothing to do with the pending bill, which would revamp a pair of small business research programs. He writes that 4 of the amendments propose different levels of new restrictions on EPA regulation of carbon emissions. Another would end jobless benefits for millionaires. The others are GOP and Democratic alternatives for planning a consolidation of federal programs. All of those will need 60 votes for passage. Again, votes expected about 4 p.m. Eastern on the Senate floor. The House, meanwhile, is continuing work on a bill that would block EPA regulation of greenhouse gases. They're in debate on the rule now. Votes probably on the rule somewhere around 12:30. You can follow House debate, of course, on C-SPAN. And the House Budget Committee begins today, and will continue all day, marking up the proposed 2012 federal budget released yesterday by Republicans. It is $6.2 trillion lower than President Obama's proposal in planned cuts over the next decade. It would also seek more than $4 trillion in deficit reductions over the next 10 years and make significant changes to Medicare and Medicaid.
Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that the quorum call be set aside.
Without objection.
And I ask for leave to speak for 10 minutes as in morning business.
So ordered.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about another example of an EPA that I believe is out of step with American agriculture. EPA continues to pursue regulations that would require farmers to file for an additional permit if they want to apply pesticides. Well, just last month, Administrator Jackson mentioned, and I'm quoting, the critical work that farmers are doing to protect our soil, our air, and our water resources, unquote. Yet the EPA continues, I believe, to handcuff our farmers and our ranchers with very stringent new regulations, but still expects them to do all they can to feed a hungry world. Time and time again, farmers have consistently proven to be excellent stewards of the environment. They make their living from the land, and they are very mindful of maintaining and protecting and improving it. I speak from experience. I grew up on a farm. Unfortunately, we've watched organizations use the courts to twist laws against American agricultural production. A Democrat congressman from California recently noted that EPA, and again I'm quoting, often pursues a course of agency activism, unquote. He points out that the EPA is using the settlement of lawsuits to give them jurisdiction over issues that may not be allowed under existing law. More and more we are seeing important policy decisions that impact agriculture arise not from the legislative process, where it should arise from, but from the litigation process where a lawsuit settlement results in policy decisions being made. In January 2009, a court overturned the normal practice of allowing farmers to apply pesticides as long as they complied with the labeling requirements under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, which is known as FIFRA. The Sixth Circuit Court ruled that EPA doubly regulate pesticides applications under FIFRA and the Clean Water Act. Well, at least 25 Senate and House members, including myself, supported an amicus brief urging the review of the court's very ill-advised decision. But instead, the Obama administration chose to wave the white flag, ignoring science and caving to activists. They urged the Supreme Court not to hear the case and to let the ruling stand. For years, EPA managed pesticide permitting within established environmental and safety requirements. Yet the administration refused to defend what was a very established, a very long-standing approach. The EPA asked for a 2-year delay to write the permit and set up a compliance regimen. They moved forward with one onerous permitting requirement for our producers that will provide really no environmental gain. This would subject the pesticide applicators to new requirements and requirements that duplicate, a distinct shift in how the EPA regulates pesticides. It created a whole new world. This additional permitting is now inefficient, it's unnecessary, and I would argue it's inappropriate for agriculture. EPA's permitting requirements also present a challenge to local public health officials who work to control mosquitoes and prevent the spread of disease. The American Mosquito Control Association estimates that complying with the additional regulation could cost each pesticide user at least $200,000 and potentially $600,000 in California alone. And the dual permit requirement may reduce the availability of pesticides proven to control mosquito populations. Thus, the ability of public health officials to control mosquitoes and the spread of disease will be hindered. Well, we all know that bugs and weeds won't wait on another additional permit from EPA, and I sure don't think farmers and public officials should have to go through this additional process. Last week, the House of Representatives passed the Reducing Regulatory Burdens Act. It's H.R. 872. And it passed with overwhelming support, and I'm very pleased to report a bipartisan vote of 292 to 130. And Democrat Congressman Colin Peterson, who I worked with when I was Secretary of Agriculture and have a lot of respect for, said this, and I'm quoting, "It was never the intent of Congress to burden producers with additional permit requirements that would have little to no environmental benefit," unquote. I could not agree more with the former chair of the House Ag Committee. But he's not alone. 57 of his colleagues, Democrats, supported this bipartisan legislation to set the record straight and send a clear message to the EPA. Now, here in the Senate, I am a co-sponsor of a similar bill that Senator Roberts introduced this week, and I'm pleased to stand here today and support his bill. Both these bills are designed to eliminate this burdensome, costly, and redundant permit requirement for pesticide applications. I commend his efforts here. He is really trying to do something to solve this problem while protecting farmers and ranchers from additional regulation, but also very mindful of our environment. I urge the Majority Leader to act quickly on the legislation to address EPA's redundant and costly double permit requirement. We can address this in the Senate. If we don't find a solution, our producers will continue being told how to operate in a very, very difficult environment. Our producers already deal with the uncertainty of Mother Nature. We should not infuse even more uncertainty into their lives in the form of these regulations that duplicate with no discernible benefit. President Obama recently promised to eliminate programs that duplicate each other. In fact, he issued an executive order calling for a government-wide review to identify programs that either duplicated or, as he said at the time, were just plain dumb. Mr. President, I submit to you that this pesticide double regulation is really unnecessary and as dumb as it gets. We should support our farmers and ranchers as they produce safe, affordable food. And they are working to protect the land. American agriculture can continue to feed the world, and our farmers will continue to care for the land unless we set up unnecessary roadblocks. This redundant pesticide permitting requirement is just another example of overreach. The U.S. Senate, I hope, will follow the example of the House, who voted resoundingly in a very bipartisan way to correct this situation. We cannot afford delay with the compliance date just right around the corner. It's a deadline we simply cannot ignore. Mr. President, thank you. I yield the floor, and I note I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today to express my strong opposition to any attempt to prevent the Environmental Protection Agency from doing its job and protecting our families and our environment. The amendments that are being considered here in the Senate would hurt our environment. They'll harm our national security by increasing our dependence on foreign oil. They're going to devastate our public health efforts and take us in the wrong direction as we fight to compete and win and create jobs in the 21st century clean energy economy. Mr. President, the positions of leading scientists and doctors and public health experts are clear. Global climate change is real. It is harmful, and it has to be addressed. Rolling back EPA standards would be devastating to the health of our families and especially our children. These are settled issues in the scientific world. We shouldn't be spending time debating them over and over and over on the Senate floor. And by the way, Mr. President, with the price of oil spiking and families paying more and more at the pump, we ought to be focused on ways to move our country away from our dependence on foreign oil. These amendments would do exactly the opposite. They will disrupt efficiency standards that sacrifice billions of gallons of fuel and savings and increasing our foreign imports. They'll derail the cooperative efforts of automakers and auto workers and EPA and states to develop these unified national standards that provide certainty for businesses to invest in new technologies. And frankly, Mr. President, they would be harmful to our national security. Every dollar we send overseas to pay for oil is more money in the pockets of countries that are too often far from friendly to our national security interests, and that doesn't make any sense to me. But this debate isn't just about health and the environment, and it's not just about our national security dependence on foreign oil. It's also about jobs and the economy, which is exactly what we ought to be focused on right now. We are currently working on legislation on the floor to help small business owners to innovate and grow, to give them the resources they need so they can expand and add jobs and compete in a global economy. These amendments that are being considered to that bill will move our country in the opposite direction. First of all, they're going to cause massive uncertainty and upheaval for clean energy companies like the McKinstry Company in my home state of Washington that are working right now to create jobs and grow a clean energy economy. If the rules of the game keep changing, businesses are never going to have the confidence they need to invest and add workers. Second of all, we all know that America needs to move quickly into the 21st century clean energy economy. Other countries like China and India are pouring resources into investments that are creating jobs and building infrastructure. We need to make sure we position ourselves to compete and win in this critical sector. That's why, instead of harmful legislation and amendments that would take us in the wrong direction, instead of doing that, we should be talking about policies that reduce our dependence on foreign oil, support our national security objectives, and unshackle our economy so we can tap the creative energy of our nation's workers and support good family wage jobs and make sure our workers continue leading the way in this 21st century economy. That's the direction our country needs to be moving, towards a healthy and clean environment and towards the clean energy jobs of the future. We can't just bury our heads in the sand and expect our energy and our environmental problems to somehow disappear. The longer we put off dealing with these issues, the more it is going to cost us in the future. And that's exactly what the amendments that are on the floor today will do. They're bad for the environment, they're bad for the economy, they're dangerous to our families' health. The science on these issues are very clear, and it's something the people in my home state of Washington take very seriously. Because when families across America go outside for some fresh air or turn on their tap and hope to have a clean glass of water, they expect these resources to be just that, clean. So once again, I strongly oppose any attempt to take away the EPA's ability to do their job. And I hope we can work together to find real solutions to the critical problems that face our country. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
The senator from Montana, from Wyoming. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, the President today is heading to Philadelphia to talk about energy. Well, the President talks a good game, but unlike energy, talk is cheap. Well, the President plans to host a town hall meeting about his new energy policy, and I think it's time that the rhetoric face the reality of what the country is seeing, experiencing, and dealing with. And if the President truly wants to get a handle on energy costs, he needs to start by immediately stopping his Environmental Protection Agency from attempting to enact a backdoor cap-and-trade regulation. That's exactly what the EPA is doing. The only effect that that can have is to increase energy costs on American families. And the President himself admitted as much in 2008. At that time, he said, in an interview with a San Francisco newspaper, he said, under my plan of cap and trade, he said electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. Well, is the President really serious about decreasing U.S. dependency on foreign oil? Well, if so, he would then rescind his veto threat against today's congressional legislation regarding the policies of the EPA. That's why I'm here in support of the McConnell Amendment. The McConnell Amendment keeps energy prices low. It prevents the EPA from blocking the development of domestic energy. It restores the Clean Air Act to its original congressional intent. I support the McConnell Common Sense Amendment. Now, most likely, today we'll just hear more of the same from the President in his speech and town hall meeting in Philadelphia. And more of the same is the last thing that the American people need right now. American families are facing increasing gas prices. Our national security is being jeopardized by dependence on foreign sources of energy. Unrest in the Middle East and North Africa is driving high prices even higher. Now, the Department of Energy, they've made an estimate that families all across this country will spend $700 more on gasoline this year than they did last year. Meanwhile, the President will most likely deliver another speech with great goals but limited action. With gasoline at over $3.50 a gallon, the President fails to appreciate the effect that this has on the effect specifically that his administration policies have on families with bills, with kids, and with mortgages to pay. In 2008, President Obama, then a candidate for president, said that the problem wasn't that gas prices were too high, but that they had risen too fast. In his words, he said he would have preferred a more gradual adjustment. Well, this may explain why the President spent his first 2 years in the White House undermining and abandoning an all-of-the-above approach to energy. It's no wonder that he's now trying to cast blame on those who are offering a responsible alternative. The President says he wants to cut our imports of foreign oil by 1/3 by the year 2025. Well, to me, he doesn't appear to have the right vision or the political will to get there. The United States has the most combined energy resources on Earth. But when faced with new sources of U.S. energy, the administration's automatic response has been to regulate, to delay, or to shut down. The President's say one, do another policy is making the pain at the pump even worse. His approach is long on making promises, short on taking responsibility. He talks of his concern for the people affected by the Gulf oil spill, yet his drilling shutdown of the Gulf of Mexico killed their jobs and strangles energy production even today. U.S. offshore oil production is expected to drop 15% this year, thanks to the policies of this administration. The President's claim that blaming his administration for, quote, shutting down oil production, he says it doesn't track with reality. But I will tell you the administration's stalling on Gulf oil and gas drilling permits is so anti-business that even former President Bill Clinton called it ridiculous. So even as the President says he wants to cut oil imports, he told an audience in Brazil just a week or two ago that he wants the United States to become one of Brazil's best customers for oil. He said he would expedite new drilling permits. He claims that oil companies are, quote, sitting on supplies of American energy just waiting to be tapped, close quote. But the biggest thing standing in the way of is the red tape from his own Interior Department and his own Environmental Protection Agency. While use it or lose it, and that's the President's soundbite, while the use it or lose it soundbite sounds nice, it ignores the reality that the Obama administration's own policies are the most significant roadblock we have to exploring for American energy. The President also claimed to support alternative fuels, yet he didn't once mention converting coal into fuel or tapping oil shale. Oil shale production could produce an estimated 800 billion barrels of recoverable oil. That's 3 times the amount of Saudi Arabia's oil reserves. The way we can address our economic and our national security needs is by producing more American energy. We can't afford to pick and choose our energy in a time of uncertainty. We do need it all. This means allowing more U.S. exploration and lifting the burdensome regulations that make it harder for Americans to produce more energy. Renewable energy is part of it. Renewable energy is important. But there is no way that green energy and green jobs can replace the red, white, and blue energy and jobs that have continued to power our country for over a century. Until the administration acknowledges this, the administration policies will continue to make the pain at the pump even worse. And that's why I urge the members of the body, urge my colleagues to adopt the McConnell Amendment. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.